1,000 miles from Doha, the Taibeh building Gaza City. And the latest on Israel's demolition list. 2 Palestinians were reported to have died as a result of this. So no time to absorb the implications of yesterday's strike in Qatar, especially when today, like Neme Batiki, you're just running for cover.
They said there was shelling. We fled to the end of the world. We were sitting at the table. I was just telling them to watch out for the shrapnel. Then it hit the girl in the face, right at the same table. We fled to the end of the world so the shelling wouldn't hit us, but the shelling followed us to the end of the world.
More details emerged today about the targeting of Hamas's negotiators, but first reaction to what's being seen as an assault on the unspoken rules of diplomacy in the region.
I condemn the strikes that Israel carried out in Doha yesterday. They violate Qatar's sovereignty. They do nothing to secure the peace that the UK and so many of our allies are committed to.
The UAE president arrived in Qatar today, part of a procession of regional solidarity. Jordan's Crown Prince also flew in, and tomorrow Saudi Arabia's Mohammed bin Salman due to touch down. Qatar's foreign minister said Israel had committed an act of state terrorism designed to destabilise the region, and confirmed ceasefire talks were in stasis.
When it comes to the current talks, I don't think there is something valid right now, while after we're seeing such an attack.
Unlike in previous attacks, Israel claimed responsibility straight away, but then doubts over the seniority of who they'd assassinated. Today, media quoting an Israeli official saying the results of the strike for them, quote, don't look good. Hamas said 5 more junior officials had been killed. Their most senior political leaders survived, unlike other key figures in Israel's crosshairs since the October the 7th attacks. Ismail Haniyeh, Hamas's political leader at the time, killed in Tehran by an Israeli bomb. Yahya Sinwar, the architect of the October the 7th attacks, stepped up, killed fighting in Gaza in October last year. 2 other military leaders, Marwan Issa and Mohammed Dief, were next on the list. The targets of yesterday's attack, Hamas's 5-man political leadership, including Khalil al-Hayya, who Hamas says survived. The White House said Donald Trump had been alerted before the strike and that he wanted the Qataris to know, but they say they were only told once the smoke was rising. Trump's reaction to the strike through pursed lips.
Well, I'm not thrilled. I'm not thrilled about it.
We spoke to people on the route south out of Gaza City today to the so-called Humanitarian zone. The 2-kilometre journey is taking 6 hours. People are paying more than $1,000 for transportation and over $2,000 for renting accommodation on arrival.
They say evacuate the place. We want to bomb this house. Then they bomb the civilians. They do not spare tents or anything. Now I am in the street until I reach Khan Yunis tomorrow. But there is no transport, no payments, no money. My donkey cannot walk because of hunger, and I cannot walk because I haven't eaten since yesterday. I leave it to God.
So you just walk and you pray there'll be a free scrap of scorched earth when you arrive. We are in Hostages Square in Tel Aviv, and there was a very large demonstration here today. And of course, the primary concern of the families of those people that are still being held inside Gaza as hostages is that this strike in Doha, this strike of Hamas negotiators, will torpedo possible cease talks and thus endanger the lives of their loved ones even further. In the last week, Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered strikes on Lebanon, on Syria, on Gaza, of course, and then today, Yemen again. Yesterday, the Houthis in Yemen attempted to fire a missile into Israel. The Israelis, in response, hit what they described as military targets in the capital, Sana'a. But it is the strike in Doha and the targeting of those Hamas negotiators that will, of course, potentially have the most profound of implications.
Thanks, Porrick. Well, earlier I spoke to British-Israeli analyst Daniel Levy. He served as an Israeli peace negotiator during the premierships of Yitzhak Rabin and Ehud Barak. He told me he believed Israel struck Qatar to send a message to Middle Eastern governments.
This particular strike in this location seems to be aligned with other things Israel is doing in the region. It's bombed Beirut, it's bombed Damascus. The situation in Yemen continues even today. So you see this proliferation of an Israel that seems to be saying, whatever you don't like about what we're doing, you can't stop us militarily. Our allies, the Americans, won't stop us, and therefore you will eventually have to accept subservience to the project we are trying to push across the region. And I do think, Kieran, that that is part of how this is being interpreted across much of the Arab world. You've seen tremendous expressions of not just solidarity with Qatar, but I also think people scratching their heads and saying, what can we actually do to contain and deter Israel, because it is having an increasingly destabilizing and radicalizing effect in our region.
Onto that very question, is it plausible, as White House officials reportedly have suggested, that they only found out too late? Could Benjamin Netanyahu have gone ahead with this without the explicit or implicit consent of Donald Trump?
It does seem highly unlikely, Kieran. The US has its largest regional military base, Udeid, in Qatar. The US has eyes on that sky and on things that are approaching those skies. It seems unlikely that this was communicated as last minute as we are being told. I think for the Israelis, perhaps part of this idea that it's last minute is also to further attempt to undermine Qatar. You must have known the rumor mill, which is very aggressive anywhere, certainly in that part of the world, is, wait, what did the Qataris know? And so I think Israel is trying to weaken leaderships in different states, and those leaderships are saying, how do we confront this? But in terms of that US relationship, the Americans are trying to walk back the idea that they knew. It doesn't seem to hold much water, though.
And if this has sort of killed the negotiations, how does this war end?
Right now, Kieran, it seems that you have an Israeli leadership and military that are saying this war ends when the Palestinians are not only defeated, but according to cabinet ministers, are physically removed from Gaza. Gaza is resettled. The West Bank is annexed to Israel. That's how they're seeing, as well as the killing that goes on, this ends. The alternative, one has to hope, for Palestinians, but also for an Israel that's digging itself deeper into a hole. The alternative, one has to hope, is that Israel is reined in because it's not happening domestically. It's not happening of its own volition. That there are serious steps taken, ultimately those will probably have to include the US, that make Israelis say, is it worth it? Because right now, the incentive structure, the cost-benefit calculation is that Israel can continue and Israelis pay very little price. That will have to change. That's why sanctions and other measures need to be on the agenda, Kieran.
Okay. Daniel Levy, thanks for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Sir Keir Starmer has held his controversial pre-arranged meeting with the Israeli President Isaac Herzog at Downing Street, having earlier said he would make it, quote, absolutely clear that he condemned Israel's action in bombing Hamas leaders in Qatar. The Israeli president then went on to an event at Chatham House. Let's go over to Amelia Jen, who's there. Amelia, what's going on?
Well, the Israeli president left a few moments ago. The crowds here chanting "lock him up" as he did so. And earlier, as you say, he had a pre-arranged meeting with the Prime Minister that couldn't really have come at a more controversial time, not least because of the strike in Qatar that Keir Starmer condemned. He also told MPs today that, as well as making that condemnation absolutely clear, he would tell Mr. Herzog that restrictions on aid must be lifted, that the offensive in Gaza must stop, and that settlement building must cease. But even before that strike, Starmer had been criticised by some for even hosting that meeting. And 60 MPs had called for Herzog to be denied entry to the country, they said, for being complicit in genocide, a claim that's being examined by the International Court of Justice. And while the government here, their official position is that it's for the International Court to decide, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, said that it's an allegation that Mr. Herzog must answer. And I put that to him earlier today. Just now, he denied it outright. I also asked him about that meeting with Keir Starmer, which he said was tough. Let's have a listen.
You said that you had a tough discussion with Sir Keir Starmer. What was tough that was said?
Because, of course, Prime Minister Starmer presented his views regarding a Palestinian state, regarding the humanitarian aid in Gaza, and I offered that there will be a fact-finding mission coming to Israel, sitting with us and studying the situation in Gaza on the humanitarian level, because we have full answers and we are fully transparent. And so, we argued. We definitely argued out of respect.
Well, as president, he holds a largely ceremonial role. He doesn't make strategic decisions. He's not in the war cabinet. But as a symbolic figurehead, he's been criticised by some, particularly in the wake of the October 7 attacks, when he said that the entire Palestinian nation was responsible. But it was clear today that the biggest diplomatic pressure point was over Palestinian statehood. Keir Starmer saying that without a ceasefire and the prospect of reviving a two-state solution, he would recognise Palestine at the UN later this month. Today, Herzog was asked about that, and he said that it was a disappointing unilateral decision, one that he said would have a negative effect on any future process.
Amelia, thanks very much. Well, now, Donald Trump came to office promising to be a peacemaking president who would use his personal relationships to end wars. But in both Ukraine and the Middle East, he has struggled to get either President Putin or Prime Minister Netanyahu to change course. So where does the dramatic last few days leave his foreign policy? Our US editor, Anushka Ashtana, is outside the White House. Anushka.
Well, I think this is a real problem for Donald Trump, because Benjamin Netanyahu and Vladimir Putin are exactly the type of world leaders he thinks he can deal with, strong men like him. But maybe that is part of the problem. They will not dance to his tune, and now they are openly defying him. And that is a problem for the White House, not just because it makes it harder for Donald Trump to win a Nobel Peace Prize, as he desires, but also because it risks upending the strategic direction on foreign policy that the White House has been heading in for something like a decade. When I speak to current and former officials about this, they make clear that what Donald Trump wants is to bring the Gulf states closer to Israel, not just through the Abraham Accords that try to normalize relations, but also he wants a defense pact across that region. Well, the Gulf states that we're talking about are not likely to want to sit down with Israel now, and they're also questioning US influence. It is my understanding that the only thing that the US was warned about was that there would be a strike on Hamas, with no specific details, including the most important specific detail, where the strike would hit, which has obviously infuriated Donald Trump. And there's also some chatter here in Washington, D.C. among foreign policy experts today about whether Vladimir Putin saw the White House response to the Qatar strike, saw the angry words but no actual consequences, and whether that emboldened Putin himself.
How will President Trump respond?
Well, he has responded on the Middle East yesterday. We heard that. He has said that he is going to make a statement on Russia. As yet, what we have seen is a statement on Truth Social, in which he clearly thinks that this shouldn't have happened, but hasn't made clear what exactly he will do to respond. On the Middle East, he says it's all about the hostages, and actually he did meet with Israeli hostages in the White House today. Interestingly, they said the answer is not military. They need peace talks, but that Qatar strike has made that harder to pursue.